I am genuinely excited about what God's doing at the moment, and the more things I hear, the more excited I get. I'm sharing some of the stuff on WhatsApp I did during the week, and I've began the last couple of weeks as we've been looking at the presence of God by sharing stories, and we started way back in the 1500s. We then jumped to the early 1900s with the Welsh revival. I just want to bring us almost bang right up to date. Let's begin with Asbury in February 2023. We've got the first slide up, Chris. What happened in just last year in February was that God started to move powerfully amongst college students in America. So they had a normal chapel service at Asbury University, which is a Christian university. They just had a normal chapel service that they have every single week. But what happened was a number of students decided to stay afterwards and continue in worship. And what happened there was this thing snowballed. You can see from the picture, maybe it's a little bit dark, but that auditorium, that small auditorium, became flooded. They estimate that by the end of the 2 and a bit weeks that they were worshiping, that there were 15,000 people every day attending just to worship and pray and be in God's presence. Young people, particularly young people, college students, and it spread across college campuses in America. Just people who wanted to gather and worship and pray. People traveling from all over the world. Didn't matter what denomination or background you were in. People just wanted to be there to worship. They didn't let any celebrities step in. It was still led by the same college students that were leading it at the beginning, trying to figure out how to lead this thing. But it was led really well. It didn't become about any celebrities. It didn't become about any. It was amazing. And then fast forward to just last weekend, I picked up a whole bunch of stuff happening in London. We go to the next slide. Saint Church in Hackney decided to hold a all-night prayer gathering, and they had 3 churches gathering in London. And it was a powerful time where you had, again, younger generations on their face before Jesus, like just literally laid out in church halls in London, praying, praising, spontaneous, people confessing sins publicly in front of everyone, people crying out for more of God, worshipping, bursting into song, and that's begun spilling over into all their meetings at the moment. And there's 2 or 3 other churches, I think it's St Aldate's in Oxford, there's things happening down there at the moment. There's reports of baptisms and salvations just beginning to happen all across the nation. I think I've shared with you before, the guys in Leicester are seeing, I think at last count, it was like so far this year, they've seen like 200 or 300 people come to know Jesus in just this year so far. There was reports at Easter of 12,000 people getting baptized in France because Jesus had showed up to them. So I share all this just to say, there's something happening. And I'm not interested in hype, but I am interested in paying attention to what God is doing. And I also just wanted to say to us, there's something on young people. There's something God's doing with this next generation. And for those of us, I include myself in the older generations, our job is to make room for these young people. So if we start to see young people coming in here, we make room for them. We just say, we bless what God's doing. I'm excited, but all these events have something in common, and it's this idea of the presence of God. We're going to continue our series today on the presence of God, and I want to look today at one of the most key figures in the whole of the Bible when it comes to understanding the presence of God. We mentioned him last week, Moses. He was born as the Pharaoh was ordering that all male babies be killed. And many of you know the story. Moses is rescued. They put him in a basket, and Pharaoh's daughter finds the basket, raises Moses in the palace. It's just an incredible story. He grows up. He sees the injustice that's being done to his people in the land of Egypt. He kills an Egyptian. He's worried he's going to get caught. So he flees to the desert, and while he's in the desert, he finds a wife, he settles down, becomes a shepherd. And then all this is going on, and the Israelites are praying to God. They're like, please save us, please rescue us. And what does God do? His response, he's going to raise someone up and send them. We're going to pick this up in Exodus chapter 3. We're going to pick up just a couple of bits from Moses' life today. Apologies if I go fast. I just want to get through some of these key points. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. Just pause there a second. So it's an ordinary day at the office for Moses. He's got the sheep out on the hillside. This was not an unusual event for him. This was something he'd probably done a lot of times, except we get that this is called the mountain of God. Horeb is an alternative name that's used for Sinai that we will come to later. This is the same place Moses will return to in just a little while, where God will give him the 10 Commandments. And unbeknownst to Moses, this seemingly ordinary place was actually, like the Celtic tradition, a thin place. A place where him and God are going to meet again and again. So he sees this bush on fire. Now, I'm reliably informed that a bush burning in the desert isn't all that unusual. The actual fact there was a burning bush wasn't all that unusual. But the difference was this wasn't actually consuming the bush. The bush wasn't burning up. And so Moses recognizes there's something different. And to recognize that there's something different, Moses was going to have to pause long enough and go and take a look. He was going to have to be aware of his surroundings enough to actually pause and investigate. Reading on in verse 4. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Again, little thing here, I find it fascinating. God waits to see what Moses does. It's only as Moses moves to investigate that God speaks. It's like he's waiting to kind of woo Moses in, like, will he see the clue? Will he notice what I'm doing? Verse 5, do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. So God reveals himself. I'm the God of your people. This is Yahweh, and he is holy. He is set apart. Take off your sandals. Be reverent. You're in the presence of the King. When God shows up, his place is holy. Even if it's a dry desert in the middle of the wilderness, wherever God shows up is holy. And when we talk about the presence of God, we cannot lose that sense of the holiness, the reverence, the awe, the wow, God, you're so much bigger than me. You're so much greater than me. Reading on, verse 7. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. We're going to skip a few verses. You can read them in your own time. Verse 10. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. So God has heard the people's prayers. He's responding, and Moses, you've been picked. You've been selected on this mission. A man who was brought up in the palace is going to have to go back to the palace with a message. The place he's run from is going to be the place he's sent back to. And Moses says, who am I? Which I think is just a great question. Who am I? If you've ever been commissioned by God, you understand what Moses is feeling. And this is not just any ordinary commission. This is go and speak to the most powerful man in the whole known world at the time. And tell him to let the people go. The people that are working for him, that are serving him. And making his empire look great. Go and tell that guy. Most sane people would be questioning, just like Moses, who am I to do that? And I actually think there's something significant there. There's a kind of reluctance that God looks for in people. There's a kind of reluctance that he actually values. Call it humility, call it insecurity. But God seems to again and again pick people who feel completely unqualified. Think of just about any of the major characters in the Bible. Think about Gideon. Think about David. And the list could go on. If you feel reluctant before God, the good news is you're in very good company. Who am I, God? What were you thinking? But God sees something in Moses that if we were reading the story for the first time, we maybe wouldn't see. What does he see in Moses? God sees the heart, we see the outside. But God's response to Moses' feelings of inadequacy isn't to encourage him. He doesn't turn around and says, don't worry, Moses, you've got what it takes. He doesn't say to Moses, actually, you're one of the greatest leaders that will ever be talked about. People will be talking about you for thousands of years, Moses. Don't worry about it. No, God doesn't even actually point to Moses at all. God reframes the question and says, you shouldn't be asking, who are you? You should be asking, who am I? And that's exactly what he does. He then reveals himself and says, I am. He takes Moses' eyes off his inability and puts him onto God's ability. And he says, I will be with you. Everything else is going to be minuscule on the comparison. Your insecurity, your weakness isn't even in the equation when you add God in. You plus God is a majority. God then reveals that he's that I am, that famous phrase that he says about himself. I just am, I am. And fascinatingly, God says, I'll give you a promise that this is me who sent you. But what is the sign that God's going to give him? Well, after he obeys God, after he's gone to Pharaoh and he's persuaded him to release the people, and after he's done all that, after that, you'll come to this mountain. And when you get to the mountain, then you'll realize it was me who was with you. If I was Moses, I would be like, that's not good enough. I don't want the sign after I've obeyed you. I'd quite like the sign before. And to be fair to God, he does give him a number of signs in the coming verses. But I actually think sometimes that's how it works. We think it's God, and we don't know until we actually obey. You'll know it's me when you do the thing I've asked you to do, and you get this result. You don't always know it's God before you do the thing. I've learned that over the years. Sometimes you just obey, and then afterwards go, yeah, I actually think it was God. It was God. Sometimes we don't get the confirmation before. But this is a significant moment because this is Moses' first encounter with the presence of God. And I think we can make some assumptions about things that Moses learned. We'll put it on the screen. He learned that God's presence can meet us in the ordinary. He learned that when there's something unusual, look aside, be drawn to it. He learned that God is holy and all-powerful. And he learned, importantly, that God with us is our only hope. And I think this is what sets Moses up for the future. Now, I'm going to try and summarize vast swathes of the story at this point. Moses goes to Pharaoh with the help of Aaron, and after 7 plagues, they do bring the people out. He leads them. We get the dramatic crossing of the Red Sea. They cross over, and the shortcut version end back up at the mountain. And then last week, I began to share with you the journey of them arriving at the mountain. And it's an amazing story because the idea of God being with them is no longer this nice mental picture they have to carry. They literally have a cloud by day and a fire by night. It's not like a metaphor of God being with them. They can look up, and when they wake up in the morning, they go, oh yeah, God is with us. God is with them. So we get to the moment at the mountain, and God calls Moses up the mountain. He goes up the mountain for 40 days, face to face with God. God speaks to him, to Moses, about how he longs to dwell with his people. For 40 days, I long to dwell with my people, and if I'm going to do that, this is what it needs to look like. He gives him the 10 commandments, and then he speaks to him about this tent, this tabernacle. And he gives him these exact instructions, how to build it, how to furnish it, how to prepare it. God wants to come and dwell with his people. So Moses is on the mountain over weeks in God's presence. Just incredible. But things are not going so well at base camp. God actually warns Moses. He says, while we're up here, things are not going well down there, let's just say. It's not taken the people very long to go astray, and Aaron has done a rubbish job at keeping them on an even keel. So what's happened is Moses has been gone for 40 days, which is quite a long time. If your leader's gone for 40 days, you start to wonder, do you think he's coming back? So they start to go, well, let's just do our own thing because we're not sure if this is working out. The people build this golden calf and they're sacrificing and worshiping to it. And this just seems the most ridiculous thing when you read the story. You're like, what, guys? How did it go so wrong so quickly? You've just seen God on the mountain with thunder and cloud. But I actually don't think it's that ridiculous. I think what we see here is human nature. We long to worship something that we can see and touch and feel. They want something tangible. Of course, the second commandment is the thing that they're disobeying first, which is do not make any images of God. In other words, don't try to take the invisible God and make him visible. That's what the commandment is. And that's exactly what they do. Because they want to worship something they can see. But not only do they want to worship something they can see, they want to worship something they can control. A golden calf is very easy to pick up and go, yep, let's move on. We're going to the next place. They've spent the last few days only moving when God moves. When the cloud lifts, they move. When the cloud stops, they stay. A golden calf is just a way to control God. It seems like the most ridiculous thing, but I think it's human nature. We long to worship something we can see. Maybe in our day it's not a golden calf. Maybe it's a career. Maybe it's our relationships. Maybe it's creation itself. But trust me, idolatry is alive and well in our world today because people want to worship something they can see. And the result, of course, is God is angry. But interestingly, it's Moses that comes in to calm God down. This interaction between them is fascinating. God's thinking, right, let's just wipe out the lot of them and start again with you, Moses. And Moses is like, no, don't do that. So Moses goes down to deal with the people. He destroys the calf and says to the people, you're either with God or you're not. And then those that are not are killed. It's quite a brutal thing. Moses then goes back up the mountain, another hike. Imagine the frustration, like, here we go again. At this point, Moses is over 80 years old. And he's going back up the mountain. He's like, here we go. But we come to this next section now, Exodus 33. Moses comes back up the mountain. Then the Lord said to Moses, leave this place, you and the people you brought out of Egypt, and go to the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I will send an angel before you and drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Got through that. Go on to the land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go with you because you are a stiff-necked people, and I might destroy you on the way. God's not happy. Time to move on. It's time to move on from the mountain. It's time to go towards the promised land. God's going to send you an angel. And the people realize what they've done. The distress comes over them. We then, we get this short section talking about the commentary on the tent of meeting we looked at last week. We get a few verses about Moses meeting with God in the tent and Joshua being there too, and Joshua staying in the tent we looked at last week. We then skip forward to verse 12. Moses said to the Lord, you have been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you're pleased with me, teach me your ways so I will know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people. The Lord replied, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. Verse 15, then Moses said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? And the Lord said to Moses, I will do the very thing you have asked, because I am pleased with you and I know you by name. Another fascinating interaction. Again, God says, I'm going to do this, and Moses pushes back on God. He comes to God and says, no, I don't think that's what we should do. They're your people, not my people. You want me to lead, but the only reason in the first place I'm leading is because you said you will be with me. Moses still knows he's unqualified. He's had 40 days on the mountain. He's seen things that we dream of. but he still knows he's unqualified without God with him. I find that powerful. The only reason I'm leading is because you're with me. And he refers back to the relationship he's built up with God over this time, the favor he has, the pleasure God has with him. If God's not going, we're not going. And like I say, they've spent the last week or two, like when the cloud lifts, they follow the cloud. When the cloud rests, they stay in place. And they basically just do whatever God says. And Moses realizes that wasn't just a great strategy for the old, the last part of the journey. That is the strategy they're going to need going forward as well. Basically, God's presence or nothing. God's presence or nothing. And this whole interaction is fascinating. Firstly, when you see how God shows up in Exodus, he's big, he's powerful, he's mighty, and yet Moses boldly comes before God and on behalf of the people makes a stand. And Moses himself is incredibly frustrated with the people, but he still makes a stand on their behalf. I think this reveals that Moses really knew God. He really knew God's heart for his people and for his presence with them. Now, most of us, if I told you God is sending you on a mission and he's going to send an angel with you, I'd be pretty delighted. I'd be like, that's pretty nice. I'd love to have an angel go with me on this mission that you sent. But would we settle for an angel? I think Moses got it. It's not about the signs, the wonders, the angelic activity. It's not about any of that. That's all the distraction. It's about the presence of God. I partly wonder if God's almost testing Moses here to see. Is it just about the amazing things you've seen me do in the last while? The angelic activity involved in all of that? Or is it about my presence? But Moses says, I'll put your presence above everything else. He understood that God actually wanted to dwell with his people. God's desire. He'd spent 40 days learning God's heart to be with his people. That's why the tabernacle was talked about. Now, I mentioned last week the idea of the tent of meeting, which was this tent that Moses set up outside the camp where people could go and inquire of the Lord. And we learned last week that although it says anyone could go to inquire of the Lord, we only know of Moses and Joshua actually there. Everyone else stayed at their own tent. And later in the Bible, this term, the tent of meeting, becomes synonymous with the tabernacle, this tent they're going to build. But in that earlier passage, it's definitely something separate. Because the tent of meeting that Moses first talks about is outside the camp. The tabernacle, the strategy for that is the tabernacle must be at the very center of the life of Israel. They camp, and wherever they camp is based on the tribes of Israel camp based on where the tabernacle is. Where the tabernacle stops, they camp around it. And on the mountaintop, Moses is given these incredible details of the tabernacle, how to build it, decorate it, and how to set it up. And when you look at the history of that time, actually the tabernacle has a lot of similarities with the other temples in the Middle Near East area. There are actually quite a few similarities to other temples that are referred to in the whole region at the time. The elaborate furnishings, the fittings, the gold, the well-crafted materials, the furniture. But there's one massive difference between the tabernacle and all the other temples of all the other gods that were being worshipped at the time. And that is that this temple did not have an idol. They would build these temples to other gods, and they would always put something in the middle of it to represent the god. They'd put an idol at the center of it. But the tabernacle was different. There was no idol, because God himself would dwell there. There's not an image of God, it's actually God. So that tabernacle was supposed to be at the center of Israel's life. And it was a symbolic kind of reminder for the people to always put the presence of God at the center of their lives. They would wake up in the morning, they'd be doing their normal activities, and they'd be able to see there's the tabernacle where God himself dwells. All the effort, the sacrificial system, the rules for priests, the festivals, the procedures, were all there to remind them they have a great, powerful, and holy God in their midst. They're going to have to make some adjustments. Now, Moses wasn't a perfect man, but I believe it was his leadership that kept the presence of God at the center for the entirety of his life. I believe his early experiences of meeting God in that burning bush set him up for the future journey God would have him on. And it's an amazing, we get all that interaction, that pushback between God and Moses. And God finally says, yes, my presence will go with you. And after all of that, Moses still has the boldness for more. Verse 18. Then Moses said, now show me your glory. So Moses has pushed back against God. He said, no, that's not good enough. An angel isn't going to work. We need the presence of God with us. And God goes, yes. If I was Moses at this point, I'd probably be like, great, let's not push it any further. Let's quit while we're ahead. But there's something about spending that much time in the presence of God that creates a hunger in you for more. When you've really experienced the presence of God, you don't come away going, well, that's enough. I've had enough of God now. Moses says, show me your glory. Can you imagine the boldness, the audacity to say that to God? Show me your glory. He was unsatisfied with what he'd experienced so far. He asked for more. And the next time Moses has to go back up the mountain again, he's really getting his steps in. And that's because when he came down the first time, in his anger, he smashes the stone tablets up. So he has to go back up and ask God, could you make version 2, please? So he goes up the second time, and when he comes down the second time, such is his experience of God, it says that his face shone. You could see the impact of the presence of God on Moses' face, and he would wear a veil so that the people weren't completely freaked out by the fact he was glowing. He had that God suntan. I believe Moses' value for the presence of God is the thing that set him up for this life-changing encounter. So how do we make the presence of God our priority? I've got 3 quick things for us. It begins with this: realize our lack. Like Moses, we have to begin with the fact that we actually don't have anything to offer God. We live in a culture that's very driven towards, like, if you work hard enough, if you just find the right strategies, you can make anything happen. If you just learn the right information, watch the right video, then you can solve this problem. You can try with your own energy to achieve anything, be that self-made man or woman. Now, being passionate is to be commended, but being driven is dangerous. And sadly, we can bring that to our religious and spiritual lives as well. It's on me to figure out how to be a better Christian, to reach my neighbors. If I work hard enough, if I'm smart enough, if I read the right books, then I'll be able to excel as a Jesus follower. This drivenness to achieve, to strive, to perform, to try and earn something. And the problem with that kind of faith is that it becomes so quickly dependent on us. We can be driven by our ego, the need to look good, to be successful, to find love and approval from others. But the quicker we can realize that following Jesus is more about surrender and obedience than it is about cleverness and grit, the quicker we can become presence-centered. What have we got without the presence of God? The problem we have is that we often think we've got quite a lot without God. We think we can achieve great things without him. We can, you know what, God, don't worry. We can sing some songs. We can look at your Bible. We can do all those things without the presence of God. But what do we have without the presence of God? Jesus himself said he only did what he saw the Father doing. That means there was a lot of things he didn't do. He lived a life dependent on the presence of his Father. If your presence isn't in it, I'm not interested. We need to realize that the presence of God is what we need. We need to realize we have nothing on our own. And we need to realize that one moment in God's presence can achieve more than an entire lifetime of striving. God isn't struggling to have the ability to transform our world. God isn't up there scratching his head going, how am I going to solve these problems? Where am I going to find the power that's needed in East Lothian? He's looking for a people who will surrender and be obedient to his presence. So it begins with realizing our lack. The second one is we need to remain flexible. The thing about putting God's presence at the center of all we do is it requires that our own ideas aren't at the center. By definition, they have to be at the edge. Now, don't get me wrong, I believe God loves planning and order. We look at creation and we see planning and we see order and we see things done in the right way. So I'm not saying planning is not important. But for people who really like to plan, journeying with God's presence can be quite challenging because it requires us sometimes to give up our own ideas and our own plans. The humility to change direction or give up on a plan that we had. Will we turn when he turns? Now, our Sunday gatherings, you may not realize it, but quite a bit of work goes into planning for these gatherings. This 1.5 hours together. But do we hold our plans lightly enough? Yes, I could say to you, I've spent hours this week, the last couple of weeks, just pondering this preach. I just need to get my words out on Sunday. What if God has a different plan? Will I lay down everything I do before God? Will we come in and we're all, this applies to everyone, we all come in and we lay down our agendas and we say, God, your agenda is actually the most important thing in what we're doing. It hasn't happened very often, but there have been times where I've got up to speak and I felt like the Lord says, you've got the wrong message. And in that moment, I have to decide, what am I going to do? Am I going to do the thing I've prepared, the thing that will maybe make me look a little bit better? Or am I going to fumble through what I think God might want to say? It might not be eloquent. It might not be great. It might not have wonderful slides behind me. It might not have any of that. But will I be willing to lay down my agenda? And that's just an illustration. I don't just mean here on Sundays. If we want to be a presence-centered people, it means a willingness to lay down our plans, our agendas, and our ideas in our lives. Maybe you've been working on a career and building towards a position that you're going towards. And the Lord says, no, I want you over here. Maybe you've been setting up home in an area and God says, no, actually, I want you over here. Maybe the Lord is asking you to make a change in your life. To be presence-centered is to be flexible and obedient to what he calls us to. And interruptions are a huge part of it. If you read through the Gospels, it feels like it's just one interruption after another for poor Jesus. But sometimes God interrupts our lives, and we maybe have our day planned out, and God interrupts us and says, I want you to actually help that neighbor over there, rather than doing the things you had planned. And I think he does that to see whether we're willing to put him first. So we hold our plans lightly. And then finally, we seek after him. We talked about this last week, this idea of seeking his face. But I think Moses models this brilliantly for us. When he spots something unusual on the burning bush, he doesn't just go, okay, great, and move on. He moves in closer to investigate. When no one else will go up the mountain, Moses goes up the mountain. He creates a tent of meeting outside of the camp so people can speak with God. Something that seems to be his idea. He contends with God for the people. God, these are your people, and I'm standing in the gap. He contends for God's presence to be the priority for the people of Israel, and he has the boldness to still say, show me your glory. I love Moses' passion, his boldness, and his heart for the presence of God. And I think that's what made him a great leader. And what he tasted of made him hungry for more. So if we want to put the presence of God at the center, we've got these three things. We need to realize our lack, remain flexible, and continually seek after him. I think Moses shows us that if we want to put God's presence as our number one priority, there is nothing more valuable. And that is our heart as a church. We want to be a presence-centered church where we don't just fill up all our time with programs and activities, but we lean in and we say, God, what are you doing in our community? How do we respond to what you're blessing? Just a little example of that. The Gather worship nights that we just started a while back, we've toyed with the idea of having worship nights for years. And we used to do them in our old church. And we've just been going, God, when is the right timing? Is there a timing thing that we need to wait for? And then we stepped into 2024, and you guys know we've just been doing worship in the way that we do worship now for the last few years. But it's felt like we stepped into 24 and worship shifted in this room. Some of you came up to me and commented, there's something different in the worship this year. We're doing the same songs, we're maybe singing the same things, but there's something different in the room. And so we went, okay, if God's blessing that in this season, how do we lean in to what he's doing? So that's why we're going to start these worship nights. I've said to the leadership team multiple times, working with all the other churches and working in the more traditional settings is completely outside of my comfort zone. But in the last few months, we just keep getting invited to be part of things that are going on, United. We keep getting invited. We get positive feedback every time we're involved. And so we're like, right, we're going to lean in with worship because we feel God's breathing on worship at the moment. And then we're like, okay, well, God's also breathing on us doing stuff in unity with the churches locally at the moment. So how do we lean in on that? We're going to make these worship nights not about us. We're going to make these about a region. And we're going to invite people in. So that's just a little example, just to say we're trying to, and we don't get it perfect, but we're trying to put the presence of God at the center. What God's blessing, that's where we want to go. We want to put our energy where God's presence is blessing. We're going to respond in a minute just with a little bit of time of worship, just a time to enjoy God's presence together. But before we do that, I'm just going to pray. Laura, I wonder if you want to come up and just start to play a little bit on the keyboard for us, just as we pause at the end here. God, we thank you for your presence. And God, just as we did last week, we just take a moment just to pause at the end of our time together. And if there's things you want to speak to us as your people, I pray that you would do that. Holy Spirit, we give you permission to come in this place, to speak to us. And God, we've tasted of your presence. But like Moses, I want to come boldly before you and say, yes, I hear of great things happening around the UK and across the world at the moment. And I delight and I praise and celebrate what you're doing there, God. But God, I stand here today and say, show me your glory. In this place at this time, let your presence come and dwell amongst us, God. Let's just sit for a moment, and in just a moment I'll lead us in a final song. But just sit in this moment and just engage with God for a minute.